This video is brought to you by Ridge's wallet and key case. The next update for your wallet and keys is here, and you can get 10% off your order by using offer code SKILLUP. Click the link below to get to it, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Alright, let me put it this way. I suspect you're going to see a real spread of scores when it comes to Atomic Heart. I do expect you'll see a few 8s and 9s, maybe even a 10 here or there. I also expect you'll see a few 5 or 6s as well, maybe even lower. That's because Atomic Heart has a bunch of stuff that works really well, but it's also got some fucking bullshit that really wrecks this experience. I'm really mixed on this overall. Like, point blank, if you were to ask me, did I enjoy this? I'm gonna be like, sort of? There were definitely parts of Atomic Heart that I both enjoyed and appreciated. Many of the fundamentals of a good AAA single-player shooter are here. Visuals, technical performance, combat, enemy design, and some really interesting levels and scenarios. But, and it's going to take me the full length of this review to explain this properly, but this package just doesn't come together. It has many of the elements of something that should coalesce into something immersive, emotive, memorable, but it never does. It never forms that monolithic identity the way that great single-player shooters do. The way we look back on Deus Ex or Bioshock or Prey or the Metro games, I really do not think that people will look back on Atomic Heart in anywhere near the same way, because there is something missing at the heart of all this, and it takes a while to notice that it's not there, but when you notice, it's hard to think about anything else. In a way, I'm not super surprised about this outcome, since I've always viewed Atomic Heart as a bit of an oddity. All of its pre-release trailers look so good that I was like, what's the catch here? I actually played a preview build of it a few weeks back, and I walked away really impressed, because a preview build is just a slice of a game. And yeah, it's all there. All the things I was looking for were right there in that preview slice. But I'd heard that the game was shooting for 20 hours long, and it's really hard to make a good single-player shooter that works for a full 20 hours. So I was keeping my hype in check, thinking that maybe this could all go south. Sure enough, the cracks in Atomic Heart really start to show with prolonged exposure to it. Its visual style is unique, but visual motifs are adopted and cast aside so quickly that the game is never able to develop a sense of place. Its gameplay and enemy design are good, but its combat scenarios are often exhausting, with bullet sponge enemies endlessly spawning, followed by bullet sponge bosses who never ask you to do anything more than just shoot or hit them a bunch. Its level and puzzle design is elaborate and ambitious, but it's also unwieldy, as many puzzles drag on and levels often feel over-designed. Its open world segments look pretty and they seem full of interesting ideas and systems, but none of them actually work, as no effort has been put into balancing enemy density, stealth options, and incentives. Crucially, the writing in this game is terrible. Holy shit, it is basement level bad. The story is laughably predictable and yet so drawn out. You roll your eyes when your dumbass main character realizes the obvious plot points like 15 hours after you realize them. Every character is so obnoxious and just won't shut up, especially the main character, who tries so hard to exude pissed off, angry man energy that he spends the entire time pissing and moaning and complaining and wisecracking about everything, when a few simple grunts would have done his characterization far better. And don't get me started on the sleazy kiosk lady. We'll talk more about her later, believe me. The writing is so bad that it materially impacted my enjoyment of this experience massively, because it really takes you out of this experience. That really matters, because these types of single-player shooter experiences are ultimately about immersion, I think. This isn't Doom or Halo or Destiny or Borderlands. This is a certain type of shooter where we're stepping into someone's shoes so that we can be immersed in their story and in their world. That is where Atomic Heart really falls down. It's pretty, it's actiony, it's got the sexy robots, but it never manages to immerse you in a story, in characters, or in a world that feel real or believable or cohesive or anything like that. Like the automatons you battle, Atomic Heart just feels kind of robotic and fake, which really is one of the most dire criticisms you can level at a game like this.
What the hell are you doing, lousy bot? Get your rusty metal ass aside!
We'll do performance first, as usual. I tested Atomic Heart on 3 PCs, an RTX 4090 AMD Ryzen 5950X, an RTX 2080 Ti AMD Ryzen 3700X, and the Steam Deck. A few things to shout out first. The game will spend a minute or two installing shaders the very first time you boot it up. You'll only have to do that once, and after that, there are basically no loading screens in game, and I never encountered any of the stuttering that is plaguing many modern PC titles. I did encounter an issue with VSync where I wasn't able to toggle it on. That was resulting in significant screen tearing. I had to enable VSync through the NVIDIA control panel, which did fix the issue. DLSS is supported here, including DLSS 3 frame generation. I went with the 2.0 option since the 40 series card was producing more than enough frames on its own and it didn't need the help. There's a fairly expansive graphical options menu that does let you tweak things like motion blur, depth of field, and even set your hard drive type. One important omission though is an FOV slider. The developers have just said nope to one of the most important options in any shooter. I can kind of understand the absence of this on consoles since FOV does impact performance, but on a PC port, nah man, that's just not cool. It's a big problem because this game's FOV is actually quite narrow, so I do expect at least a few people won't be able to play it due to motion sickness. There's only a very basic audio options menu that lets you control different volumes. There's no toggles for different audio setups like headphones versus 5.1, no binaural audio mix. That's a bit of a bummer because I definitely found some issues with directional audio and audio telegraphs, and some more flexible options here would have been helpful. One important thing I'll point out when playing on a keyboard and mouse is that the game utilizes mouse acceleration, and there's no way to turn it off in the menu. I hate mouse acceleration so much, and as a result, I never felt like I had full control over my weapon during tense gunplay sequences. It always felt as though it was sliding a few centimeters this way or that when I did any quick aiming. Kind of a bummer. I really hope they patch that. So I got a lot of problems with Atomic Heart, but performance ain't one. On the 2080 Ti machine, this runs at 4K with DLSS set to performance. It looks great and it stays locked at near 60 FPS, not a full 60, but close enough, and most importantly, it's very stable. That frame rate really doesn't dip much. I know people are becoming increasingly wary of DLSS like it's a crutch to hide bad optimization. Well, this is Atomic Heart max settings running on a 2080 Ti, and it's still hitting 30 to 40 FPS. That's pretty damn good, and really the best possible evidence I can provide that this is a well-optimized game. On the Steam Deck, cloud saves are already enabled, so you can switch back and forth between desktop and deck with ease. At native resolution, low settings, you can get a pretty locked 30 FPS. So yeah, Atomic Heart is absolutely playable on the Steam Deck, no doubt about it. With this sort of performance on lower end machines, performance on the 4090 becomes rather academic, but yeah, it runs really well. At 4K resolution, I was averaging 120 FPS, which is where I capped it at. Very few frame drops, ran generally flawlessly. So yeah, 3 PCs tested, all of them sterling performance. A PC port for a new AAA game that's actually good? Quick, someone write this down, it's a red letter day. In terms of bugs and stability, I didn't get a single crash during my playthrough. I did get some minor bugs, namely some UI stuff, some audio glitches, but all of it was very small potatoes. It's definitely a very polished, very well optimized video game, so congrats to the developers for that. That's an even bigger achievement when you stand back and take in the fact that Atomic Heart looks pretty good, at least technically speaking. But when we start to get to the topic of art direction, it gets a lot more complicated. Atomic Heart opens here in a sequence that is the USSR yin to Bioshock's Americana-infused yang. It's not remotely subtle about what it's aiming for here, and it's actually the first of a number of Bioshock references you might spot throughout the game. No two ways about it, this is all pretty spectacular looking. The canal ride gives way to crowded streets, leading to a frankly overwhelming parade sequence, culminating in a trip to the clouds where you can survey from on high the full scope of the USSR's technologically infused megalomania. In this alternative history, post-World War II Russia would invent a brand new chemical substance that fueled a golden age of scientific discovery, enabling all manner of new technology, but most notably automatons, which not only serve Soviet citizens, but the USSR also distributes them freely to other countries as a form of foreign aid. Chekhov quietly polishing his gun in the corner. These opening moments present a visual cohesion that isn't sustained throughout the rest of the game. Partly, that's for good reason. In the opening sections, you're seeing the USSR as it would like to be seen, where later you're journeying into its grotesque underbelly. Form gives way to function in the USSR's secret scientific testing facilities and KGB-style command centers. In these other parts of the game, though, Atomic Heart really struggles to find its visual footing. It throws a lot at the wall to see what sticks. And some of it absolutely does. There's a level set in a theater, for example, that's really well done, and it embraces the setting to produce some striking visuals and sequences sequences. There's some really evocative imagery at times as the game showcases how far the Soviets are pushing technological and biological frontiers. These sequences are the exception. By and large, Atomic Heart looks and feels visually thrown together and confused. Its visuals pull in so many different visual elements and they don't look like they fit together correctly. Like this example in the open world. There's wooden fences next to advanced laser fences, there's high-tech security cameras suspended on old wooden posts, there's futuristic automatons patrolling next to rundown jalopies, and then all of a sudden there's a rocket-powered wooden house that comes and lands next to you. It's like, what's going on here? This sequence here is one where I need to revive a tree to open a door, and to do that I need to find 4 canisters in 4 different wings of this underground complex, and each wing looks totally different. One wing is a bureaucratic office, another is a big series of pools for mixing chemicals, another is this scientific testing lab thing, and another is this rundown train yard. And this is just one puzzle in one compound, and that is how quickly we are cycling through different visual motifs. And at this point you're probably saying, dude, that's just normal video game stuff, what the fuck are you talking about? And it is, sure, but most games introduce you to a new setting and then they develop that setting as you move deeper into it. There's a consistency that is built and maintained for a period before moving on to the next visual style, and that creates a sense of world building and immersion because these spaces feel sort of real. Atomic Heart doesn't do that. It is so desperate to throw so much art design at you that it never asks, does this art belong here? Or do we need to switch to a different style so quickly? It feels like the developers were so determined to dazzle you at every turn that they forgot that every turn is too often. I'll put it this way, the Aperture Science Center feels like a science center. The Metro Tunnels felt like Metro Tunnels. The Black Mesa Research Facility had these wings that had a distinct feel to each of them. The Talos Space Station in Prey felt like an Art Deco inspired space station. Atomic Heart never achieves that sense of place because the game is cycling through different settings at such a manic pace, none of it feels authentic. It feels like a bunch of dioramas taped together, like a slideshow that is moving on to the next slide too quickly, and the result is a distinct absence of immersion and at times disorientation. But you won't ever get lost though, since there is a marker guiding your every step, and you can also scan the environment to see enemies through walls and highlight any lootable containers. Generally not a fan of either of those things in games. I've spoken a lot about designing levels that you can see with your eyes, but Atomic Heart is so visually noisy that you need this scanning tool, otherwise you just won't be able to see the things that you need to collect or the places you need to go. Same goes for the GPS marker guiding you. The levels here are very large and not intuitive to explore. Their layouts are often needlessly labyrinthine and confusing, so you aren't actually exploring these levels, you're kind of just following the marker. As for what these levels are, yeah, so there's an overworld, which we'll talk about soon, but most of the game is set underground in these labs, these administrative centers, in these bunkers, in a theater. Even the theater is underground for some reason. You're sent to these locations to do a thing, and then when you get there, you typically find that the power's turned off, or some MacGuffins are missing, and you need to kill a bunch of enemies and solve a bunch of puzzles to unlock the final boss encounter, move the story forward, move on to the next zone. Generally speaking, all of this is fine. Sometimes it works really well, like in the theater level, where its setting, solid pacing, and interesting puzzles coalesce to create a very interesting experience. A lot of the time though, it doesn't click together quite so neatly, as some of the puzzles can go on for a really long time, and combat has its own host of issues related to enemy health and spawn rates. I will say though that these underground levels are one of the more successful aspects of the game design, which stands in stark contrast to the open world stuff, which is frankly a bit of a disaster.
Adding connected central hub is a very difficult task.
So I mentioned earlier that Atomic Heart has an overworld structure. It does, but definitely don't think of that overworld as the backbone of the game. There are actually a few different open world areas that you move between by different means, and they host not only the main mission levels, but also optional bunkers that allow you to collect materials and unlock new weapon patterns. When you arrive in the open world, you're briefly introduced to its myriad systems. There are a lot of enemies patrolling, there are cameras watching what's going on. If any of those cameras see you, they'll immediately call reinforcements. If you happen to kill any robots or cameras, then a repair drone is immediately dispatched to repair that robot or camera on the spot. They will do this endlessly, and there is no way to disable this behavior unless you bring down the entire region's security network, which is done by finding the right terminal to switch off a big ass fan. The security system then lowers to the ground and you can temporarily disable it, but only temporarily. So what I've described is a bunch of really interesting ideas that completely fall apart because no effort has been put into balancing any of them. This game has a stealth system. It's implied that you are meant to stealth through a lot of these sections. that just doesn't work. You can crouch to reduce your noise, and you're meant to be able to sneak up behind enemies and one-hit KO them with a QTE, but there are just so many fucking enemies patrolling around and so many cameras spying on you that trying to avoid them feels borderline impossible. Trying to kill all of them would just sap you of all of your resources since all the enemies have so much health. Plus, they all get automatically repaired anyway, so there's kind of no point to killing them. If enemy density or enemy health was lower, this might have worked, but they're not, so it doesn't. Then there's the reinforcements, which materialize almost instantly. Annoying flying drones who zap you from the sky, and if you shoot them down, 2 more arrive seconds later. While you're doing that, the repair drone you can't see off screen because of the narrow field of view has just repaired that automaton that you had previously pumped 6 slugs into, and now you gotta deal with him all over again. So you might think, well, why don't you just turn off the system? Sure, but that's not easy to do, especially the first time you arrive in a zone and you don't know where that reset button is. So most of your time when you come to a new zone, it's spent under these oppressive conditions with enemies breathing down your neck, threatening to immediately respawn if you dare kill them. So what do? Well, you kind of just run past everything, for real. That is the optimal way to deal with this open world because trying to confront it feels utterly pointless. So you run, or you get in a car with some of the worst driving physics I've experienced since Ghost Recon Wildlands, and you haul ass. Don't bump into any walls with the car, by the way, because if you do, your car will immediately set on fire and explode. Soviet workmanship at its absolute finest.
That is not subject to the emergency protocol.
The other dimension is that the overworld areas all look the same. They're just the green hill zone, dotted with little buildings and weird technology stuff like the laser fences or the high-tech wind turbine. It would have been nice if these open world segments had some diversity to them. Ironically enough, Atomic Heart's underground segments are frenetic in their visual variety, whereas the overworld has all of the visual diversity of Zeta Halo. That's a smaller issue. The bigger issue is just how suffocating these open world segments feel, and the way that you're essentially forced to just run past stuff rather than, fight it. I've heard some people comment that Atomic Heart has immersive sim elements. That is false. Other than a basically non-functional stealth system, there are no ways to advance your objectives other than just kill stuff with guns or zap them with your jazz hands. The open world would have been a really interesting sandbox to allow players to approach combat or exploration challenges in a variety of ways, but there are no other ways, and even if there were, you wouldn't have time to properly experiment with them because you'd be busy fighting off 6 endlessly respawning bullet sponge robots. Just a really baffling open world design model that I hope we don't see again anytime soon. Much like the open world, combat in Atomic Heart is full of promising ideas and mechanics that have not been dialed in properly. I want to start by saying that overall, I actually enjoyed the combat in this game. It's easily my favorite part of the package. There are a number of weapons which all fulfill a specific function and feel good to use. There are abilities that allow you to freeze or levitate or electrocute targets. They're kind of simple in their functionality, but they do work and they're fun to use. Enemies are actually quite diverse and quite fun to fight against. They have good movesets and they telegraph their big attacks, allowing you to dodge. The melee is the real standout star of the show. Since enemies have a lot of health and ammo isn't infinite, you will rely on axes, swords, and maces to cleave a path through the Soviet robot army. The animations, the sound, the feedback when you connect, the way enemies buckle under the weight of your weapons, the way their exteriors degrade to show damage, it's all excellent. I don't think I've experienced first-person melee combat in a game this good, except in Darktide, and that is high praise because the melee combat there is fucking awesome. So to be in that same category is a big achievement. Melee combat is, I think, the single best part of the Atomic Heart experience. That's not only because the melee combat is so good, but it's also because the rest of the combat package comes undone in a similar way that the open world does. The principal culprit is enemy health. Enemies just feel way too spongy. They just do. Bringing down the more basic foes one-on-one is fine, but you're often fighting multiple foes at once. And again, you've got this narrow field of view, they're all attacking you at once, you're constantly getting knocked down, and you can't stay on top of one target easily because they're zipping all over the place, and it's a lot. Then there's the spawn rates. Later on, you'll come to these sequences where the game just floods you with enemies, and it's like, oh man, come on. They're not hard because you can take quite a few hits, and you have plenty of instant healing on hand. It's just kind of laborious as you just keep swinging or shooting and the enemies just keep on coming. The bosses represent the absolute worst of this. While visually spectacular, bosses have very few interesting mechanics to engage with. All of them, bar one, just involve shooting them a bunch of times while dodging their attacks. That's it. This little squiddy boss thing is a great example. I'm shooting this fucking guy with a rocket launcher and look how much damage is being done. I went through like 30 rockets with this guy and it still wasn't enough. And the entire time I was just dodging back and forth over this whale corpse to avoid his laser. That was it. It's a really cool looking fight that was ultimately just a slow, boring war of attrition. I actually died on this guy earlier because I ran out of ammo, so I had to go and craft more ammo before coming back. That gives you an idea of how bullet spongy these bosses are. One of the weirdest decisions that Atomic Heart makes is that there's no run button. You can either walk or dodge, that's it. The walk is really slow, by the way. Later on, you can unlock an increase to your walk speed, at which point it feels like you're sort of running, but even then, the absence of a dedicated sprint or run button makes combat feel much slower and clunkier than it otherwise should be. But yeah, there is a progression path that will upgrade your core stats, your jazz hand abilities, and your weapons. These upgrades do not materially change combat. They make your gun stronger, hold more bullets, etc. Don't expect combat will become more interesting or have more options available the further you progress into the game. Once you play the first few hours, you've essentially seen everything the Combat Sandbox has to offer, except for unlocking some new weapons. Oh, and the other problem with progression is that it involves talking to the sleazy kiosk lady.
Just give me laser protection.
Oh, so brutal. I'm shaking. Squirt your polymer inside me.
Okay, so this is the part where we get to Atomic Heart's absolute worst feature, its writing. So to begin, I know that there was some concern that Atomic Heart would somehow glorify the USSR like Soviet propaganda. That is definitely not the case. The idealized communist utopia you see in the intro sequence is just the setup. The turn definitely comes later. The story revolves around a new neural implant that is going to hook everyone up to something called Collective 2.0. That's collective with a K, mind you. Ostensibly, this technology will allow humans to control robots with just their thoughts and would also give them instantaneous access to the vast wealth of human knowledge. Think Neo learning Kung Fu in the Matrix while also being able to control the squiddies with his mind. That is Collective 2.0. Doesn't take much imagination to guess where this story might go when it comes to the Soviet Union having neural chips installed in everyone's head. I wish that I could say that Atomic Heart was full of twists and turns and surprises, revelatory exchanges, unexpected betrayals, thought-provoking commentary. Absolutely not. I mean, you can guess this game almost beat for beat from the moment this premise is delivered to you, and then it's just a matter of waiting for the dumbass main character to catch up. The stupidity of this main character, by the way, it's genuinely hard to credit. This guy is dumber than a stack of sandbags. The entire time he is blindly ignoring every single clue, every new piece of information, almost literally putting his fingers in his ears, going la 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 la, I can't hear you, refusing to believe anything he is seeing or hearing is real, blindly trusting the Communist Party scientist who is both his benefactor and his commander on this mission. The only thing that matches this main character's stupidity is his unpleasantness. There's this desire to write him as like the tough guy, take no shit, whatever, but it comes across as this relentless, unnecessary antagonism. Like, this is a really good example. This is him asking a question of someone. Listen to how he responds.
Where are we?
This is the Academy of Consequences, the facility's memory, analytics center, and primary archive. The activities of all the other complexes are studied here in order to draw conclusions and generate probability matrices.
Get to the point.
See, she was just giving a perfectly reasonable response to his question, but the writers have to make it seem like he's all, oh, I don't got time for this shit, even though he just asked the fucking question. The script is full of this stuff, with him needlessly yelling and swearing at robots who... There's no point in swearing at them because they're robots. They don't understand the concept of being threatened or being sworn at. It's ridiculous.
Great, let's go.
Assuming you have purchased a ticket.
A ticket? A fucking ticket? Are you stupid? There are corpses everywhere. There's an emergency protocol in effect over the entire facility. Start the train right now.
And it's just this for 15 hours. Him with his concrete pylon level of stupidity, combined with his relentless crotchety attitude and his machismo, it's unbearable. And then there's this kiosk. Like, it's kind of funny at the start, and you're like, oh, surely she'll calm down. But she's just at you with the most unsubtle innuendo ever. And I'm not like a prude or whatever, like this is not Christian criticism. It's just that it's really juvenile and it doesn't stop. 15 hours of her saying, oh, enter me, oh, squirt your polymer inside me. It's like, by the end, she doesn't even come up with new lines. She just remixes the old ones, and you kind of avoid going to the kiosk to upgrade because you don't want to have to hear any more of her cringy shit.
I can't wait for your strong hands to grope my interface with lustful abandon.
That's it. We're done here. Let's go.
I've spoken a few times in this review about the importance of immersion in a game like this. There were quite a few things in this game that never let me sink into that immersion. This plot, these characters, and this dialogue were the biggest roadblock. This plot is so painfully obvious and rote, and it is frustrating to watch this main character fumble in slow motion towards obvious realizations, and when he does open his mouth to say anything, he says it in the most obnoxious way possible. As I said earlier, these sorts of games are about stepping into a character's shoes, and I don't want anything to do with this guy's shoes. Like, imagine if Claptrap was the main character in Prey. That is the level of ruin that this character brings to this experience. So, at the top of this video, I said if someone asked me if I enjoyed this, I'd be like, sort of? I want to be clear in the conclusion that that is true. I sort of did enjoy myself with this, or more specifically, I enjoyed parts of it. I appreciated aspects of the visual design, particularly its Soviet-inspired megalomania. I enjoyed some of the levels and scenarios. I think some of them came together really well, and those segments stand alongside the sort of stuff you'd experience in Bioshock or Prey or Metro or whatever. I enjoyed the combat, or at least I enjoyed many of the combat elements, particularly the melee-based combat, which I think is excellent. However, everything I have just listed here has a but after it. I enjoyed some of the art design, but on the whole, it's really messy, and Atomic Heart never establishes a believable sense of place. I enjoyed some of the levels and scenarios, but they were mostly full of drawn-out puzzles, and the levels were often weird and unwieldy, and the open world stuff is a total mess, completely crushed under the weight of poor game design systems. I enjoyed the combat, but much like the open world design, it's undermined by poor enemy health balancing and spawn rates. And the writing, yeah, I've already said my piece on the writing. So while I definitely enjoyed some of this, it's just not something I'd recommend. And the reason is what I said at the start. It just doesn't come together. It has so many components that look like it should be a great AAA single player shooter. When you really look at those components, you see how fatally flawed each of them are. And as much as Atomic Heart reaches for, it isn't guided by a cohesive vision that makes this whole thing feel like it belongs together. Those great shooters I've listed throughout this video, and others like them, Half-Life, Fear, the Wolfenstein games, they all have this quality, this identity that makes them unmistakably them. Atomic Heart doesn't have that. It's just too thrown together, and too much of it just doesn't work. As such, I do not recommend Atomic Heart. For many, many years now, I have been using a Ridge wallet, so I was thrilled when last year they reached out to me wanting to sponsor a video on the channel. That went well, and they sponsored a few more. This year, they're going the whole hog. Ridge have actually signed up to the channel for a full year as a channel partner. That is huge. I really appreciate that support. It definitely helps me do what I do. And yeah, I just really appreciate that. So thank you, Ridge. It's a partnership that I'm really proud of because Ridge make fantastic products. Every single day I use their wallet and their key case. I could never imagine going back to the old fat leather wallet, nor could I imagine going back to that big messy clump of keys. Ridge wallets are wallets evolved. Store all of your essential cards, your cash using either the money strap or money clip, protect yourself from scammers with RFID protection, and look like a classy dude because these things are sleek and stylish and come in a range of colors and materials, allowing you to rock whatever look works for you. Same goes for their key cases. Now all of my keys neatly fold into a little stack. They sit so much more comfortably against the body, and I chose a color that matches my North Shore Ridge wallet. Really love it. There are other products there too, like their excellent backpack, their bolt action pens, and tons more. All of it is worth a look, and all of it is 10% off when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Visit ridge.com/skillup and get 10% off store-wide. Link below in the description and the pinned comment. Thanks Ridge for sponsoring the channel for 2023, and a big thank you to you out there for watching the videos, since Ridge would not be supporting the channel if it weren't for you guys. Appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.